Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Author Talk with me, Gavin, and today I'm here with Jackson Dickert.
Nice to be here, Gavin. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
How does it feel to be interviewed instead of being the interviewer?
Oh, man, let me tell you, you probably know by this point, but just preparing for an interview, it's tough. There's a lot of research and work that goes into trying to make for an entertaining interview. So honestly, it's nice to sit down and have a conversation with somebody about books and publishing and everything else without having to do a bunch of homework ahead of time.
Speaking of that, I'm going to start off with questions about your author interviewing job, and then I'm going to ask you more questions about your book and you as an author. So, who is your favorite author that you have interviewed?
This will probably come as no surprise, but it's probably Brandon Sanderson. I've adored his work since I was, I guess, in high school. And it's funny too. I actually DNF'd Mistborn twice before I
Oh,
got into it. I know I struggled. I don't know if it's the ADHD or what it is, but sometimes when I'm first trying to get into a big world like that, the way Mistborn starts out, it starts out with Kelsier and it's this big overview look at the world, and then it switches to this other character that I haven't gotten to know yet, and then it takes a minute for Vin to get into the gang and everything. So man, it took me. The breakthrough point was once she got with the crew. But Sanderson is probably my favorite. Love his work. The thing I always tell people, if I had to pick one favorite book, it would probably be like The Fisherman by John Langan. And I haven't
yeah.
gotten to interview him yet. So I just tell you that because the answer could be different if I end up getting to interview him.
Right. And I was wondering how you deal with rejection or people not responding.
So I would say not responding is definitely disappointing. I think it's more disappointing starting out or when I was younger. And then these days, if somebody doesn't reply, I just shrug. It is what it is. And all you can do is ask, right? You can invite
Right.
people there. And to be fair, too, especially from my interviews, there's a lot of authors, probably most authors, who are pretty introverted, who the
Yeah.
idea of let me sit down in front of a camera and let somebody make fun of me for half an hour just sounds like agony. It sounds like middle school. So I never hold it against anybody if they don't reply because they're really busy. And so I guess it probably used to bother me more, especially with rejections related to my writing. And then it's just the longer you do it and the more people say no, you just get thicker skin. You get a better understanding of how busy everybody is. I don't know how other adults are doing it. I don't have kids and I just going. So I can't imagine all what it's like to be like some of those authors who are juggling a job like that with kids.
Right. Like you said, some authors are introverted and maybe they don't want to do something like this. One of the authors I've interviewed that actually really surprised me was Neil Shusterman. He seems like more of the kind of introverted guy, but I went to StoryCon and he was there and I got a quick interview with him and it was really cool.
That's awesome. The other thing that I think you'll especially find with authors is even if they're a little introverted, most authors have to figure it out. It's like a muscle they have to work out and get to the point where even if they can't do this every single day for 8 hours, sit and talk to people or interview, they can at least do it for a set period of time at a con or something like that. Just like you just got to make it to the finish line until you can go back to your cave.
Right. And on that, who is an author you really want to interview?
Yeah, I would love to interview John Langan. The only book of his I've had the pleasure of reading was The Fisherman, but I love fish and I love spooky, not so much scary, but
Right.
spooky. So the John Langan wrote this literary fiction slash cosmic horror novel, and it's just magnificent. Besides him, I would love to interview George R. R. Martin, obviously,
Oh.
because I think it would just be hilarious to sit down and say, so when is the book? And then he just stands up, takes the mic off, and walks off, and that's the interview. I think
Oh
that would be
yeah.
fun.
With him right now, he just has so much pressure on him. I
Yeah,
wouldn't
he
even
does.
want to interview him because he needs to get to work.
I've never been in his position, so it's hard to say. I'm sure it's just an unimaginable level of stress
Oh, definitely.
that comes along with it. The other one that I would really love to do, which I suspect it probably won't ever happen, but this was a good example of a time that I didn't get a response back, and it didn't hurt my feelings at all because I emailed Stephen King
Oh yeah.
and was like, "Hey, I think it would be really funny to sit down and do an interview with Stephen King and his son Joe Hill."
Right.
But Stephen King the entire time and just interviewed Joe Hill.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure his website literally says he's not doing interviews anymore.
Doesn't surprise me. But still, you always got to shoot your shot. Like it's amazing though that things can, stumble your just by being polite and asking nicely.
That's what I say. Like, it was hilarious. Interviewed Lynn Buchanan after reading The Dollmakers, and I just like messaged her on Instagram, and I was like, "There's no way she's gonna respond." And she did. She was super nice about it.
That's awesome. Lynn is she
Yeah.
is.
What are the and worst experiences you've had interviewing someone?
Oh, best would probably just be like across the board time I've not gotten hit in the face when I absolutely deserved it. And then though the best funny about interviews is a lot of times I'll wrap up filming an episode of Between Two Ferns and it's hard to know if it'll be good. Like sometimes I finish it and and sitting talking to the author, and then after the author leaves to go do their own thing, I'm sitting there and I'm like, did that actually did am I gonna be able to make that into something entertaining? So far, every time I've managed to, I haven't had to like throw any out.
Right.
Um, so that's the one. Maybe that I've had in an interview was it might Alexander Darwin.
Hmm.
Um, because like I come with this crazy idea, hey, I just want you to just beat the crap out of me on
Right.
camera for 10 minutes. And he was down for it and we had fun. So that was I'm trying to think of what the worst experience would be. It would probably be like the second I ever did, which was Travis.
Oh,
And it was only because it was like he was running on it had nothing to do with Travis. It was everything to do with like me and the convention because it was like he had a time and I don't remember the circumstances that led to it, but like he got there and I didn't have everything all set up yet. So I was
oh,
frantically trying to get everything all set up. And I had rented out this room in a hotel. Lights were awful. Like if you go and you look at those earlier interviews
yeah.
that are
I've
that all the interviews that take place in that room, dude, the lighting is just atrocious. And with Travis, we couldn't how to turn the AC on. So it was hot in there. Like you can tell sweating a little bit. So
Oh.
that would be it. 100% my fault. Nothing to do with Travis, but that would probably be it.
Like we were saying about after the interview, you were saying like how you don't know if it's going to be good. I feel like it's not until I go back in the interview and I'm like, wait, I don't remember asking that. That is much better than I thought I was going to do. Or, there where it's like, oh, that kind of, but, it's,
Amazing just the things you can do with a little bit of editing and post. Like
oh, yeah.
obviously I do some crazy edits, but I mean even just little cuts and moving some audio around, you can kind of clean it if somebody, sits there for way too or
Is the worst.
it is. It really
And what tips do you have for me as a fellow author interviewer?
I would say probably do your research and like try like the questions kind of like well on Between Two Perns, but it's like, where are your ideas from? Or, like those authors have gotten a lot. And so on interviews, like it's a question. It's a effort fallback question. So I would say avoid those and try to find like a specific something about them that, maybe somebody explored, whether it's like stuff from the or about them as a person, like if they've got a weird hobby.
Like,
Um,
see, with Cannon for her main is often portrayed as like an unlikable main. But in my interview with her, I explained why I think there's reason that she is unlikable, and I don't find her as unlikable as others say. So I've
yeah.
definitely tried like going from different, and I feel like that worked.
Good, good. Yeah. The more unique, like if you're asking unique questions they haven't heard before, you're gonna get unique answers that they've never said before. And
Right.
then the people watching get to hear something new and interesting, which is I do find some interesting stuff about authors through the deep dives that I do, but I also get to cheat a little bit because they're forced to give weird answers that maybe they've never given before because I ask such ridiculous questions that you wouldn't normally ask in an interview.
And speaking of that, how do you approach the authors? Do you just email them? Do you try to meet them in person?
Yeah, it kind of depends. I would say 9 times out of 10, I email them. I just reach out, I introduce myself, very clearly explain what the show is about. They know ahead of time exactly what it is. And I say, I saw you'll be at this event and I will be at this event. So if you've got time, I'd love to make something happen. And a lot of times that works. I don't know, maybe half the time it doesn't.
Right.
And then sometimes I'll go to a convention and I'll run into people or I'll meet new people. And every once in a while, I'll stay up the whole night doing research and writing. Because some of those early interviews that I did that first year I went to Dragon Con, I stayed up all night writing,
Oh yeah.
researching them and writing questions and reading. Whew.
No, the first one is always the hardest. My first one, I feel like I wrote way too many questions, and you can see that video is significantly longer than my next one. You're my third YouTube interview. So
Cool.
I've done four separate interviews on Instagram, but this is my third YouTube interview.
And it's tricky too because you don't always know how long somebody will talk.
Right.
I'm a little rambly sometimes, in case you couldn't tell. And there are people who are less rambly and more lectury. There are people who they give their one sentence answer and they're good to go. So that can make it really tricky too. And that's again where some of the research stuff helps. If you go listen to how they are in a podcaster. That'll usually give you a good idea of how long their answers might be.
But first off, I want to say this book reminds me of a slightly grown-up Diary of a Wimpy Kid adventure.
Yeah, I can see that. That's actually probably spot on. That's spot on.